Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Who dares awaken me from my slumber? Steve Stockton, the legendary voice behind missing persons mysteries. I see, once again, you have found your way through the darkness and into the fox den for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. Yet please allow me to feed. Absolutely delicious. And now that we have recharged my powers and Mr. Stockton has released my shackles, it is once again time for the Midnight Society to take a walk through the darkness known as the Dogman phenomenon.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf, and everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, yes, once again, it is time for Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. Steve Stockton from Missing Persons Mysteries has made his way through the dark, dense, and foggy forest to sit down by the late night fire and burn some timber with us as we once again read some chapters from the Midnight Society book. Steve, you legend, how the heck are you doing, man?
I'm doing great here, getting ready for Thanksgiving. My wife and I's second one together, and then the first one since the baby got here. So we're kind of doing our own thing, going to stay home. We got invited to some places, but he'll be 12 weeks old tomorrow. I didn't want to take him around people that have recently traveled or just, a whole bunch of strangers like that, because there's a lot of stuff going around, RSV and pneumonia and that stuff. So we're going to stay home and non-traditionally have some steaks and watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. That's my favorite Thanksgiving movie, and I'm probably the only Thanksgiving movie that I can think of.
That's beautiful stuff right there. And yes, to the audience, we are recording right before Thanksgiving. So even though Steve and I are doing a bi-weekly show, yes, get ready for that. He allotted time tonight. So, I mean, that's pretty great stuff. So we don't want to hold him up for too much. But yes, that sounds great, man. And as you stated, I kind of, just like to chill with, my two little brothers and the immediate family that, does take a little bit of interest into what I'm doing. Because as stated to you earlier, I don't really chill too much with my squad and my family either. So
yeah, that's me. We talked about that before the show, that we've always been kind of loners and rebels and march to our own drum. And ain't nothing wrong with that.
Right, my friend, and to the late James Dean, a rebel without a cause. I love it, man. So.
I was a rebel without a clue when I was younger.
Well, aren't we all, my friend? So tonight you and I, to the audience, I get to speak to Steve all the time. So him and I have already spoken about this, but to y'all, you're just going to get a chance to really hear this. I've touched base on a few of these things periodically through Midnight Lycanthropy and some other podcasts I've been on recently, but we're actually going to stack it up tonight. And I sent Steve some very interesting things where I'll be able to show the majority of them here, and we're going to talk about it so anyone is able to also search that, and I'll be able to put up some artistic drawings that some of our scientists have done. So, Steve, what do you think about some of that?
Amazing stuff you sent me. Sent the one about the 18,000-year-old pup, which was discovered in near perfect condition in Siberia. That's just amazing. Scientists, some of them think that could be the oldest dog ever found. 2-month-old canine puppy born 18,000 years ago, preserved in the permafrost there in Siberia. Amazing.
Isn't that crazy right there, my friend? And that's what I'm really excited about, is that the North American Dogman Project and my science team, we think we might have stumbled onto something really beautiful right there, because unfortunately, as you just read through all that, this is in an area that it's not the easiest to get correct information out. We were lucky enough to originally even speak to any of these people that introduced this to us, and I really do hope they follow up with us. Yet, as far as they know at the moment, they can't figure out where this belongs in the lineage. It's not wolf, it's not modern day canine, and like you said, it's super old. And then when you look at the skull of it, it's a little bit elongated on the back, which shows definitely potential for a larger brain cavity. And the reason I say that is everyone wants to be like Neanderthals, not very smart. Well, we'll dive into this another time, but same thing with their skulls. A little bit on the back, it was elongated. So their brain was pretty much around the same size as ours, but on the back part, they had an extension that really helped with them to see binocular-like vision, more or less, and being able to stay focused on something, whereas us modern-day Homo sapiens, we had other advantages, like flexibility-wise, but same thing. We always want to be like, oh, they're so unintellectual, yet they pretty much had the same setup, maybe something advantage-wise over us. So when you look at that black-headed canine right there, it legit falls into the jet black terminology, where people are like, oh, we see something that is smoky black or pitch black with
blacker
elongated
than
fangs.
black,
Yeah.
And in that article you sent me, just below that, in another link, there's a 40,000-year-old wolf head that they found in the same area of Siberia, perfectly preserved in ice. And it's almost perfect just because of the freezing condition. But the animal's head is visibly bigger than that of a modern wolf. So no telling what was around back then that could be in the lineage of some of these cryptids.
Right, my friend? Isn't that so cool? And look at the difference, I mean, between the wolf head, that strange canine head, and then other puppies or wolves they found. That jet black one is 100% one of a kind.
Yeah, that's something else. And, the oldest dog they've ever found so far.
Do I believe in coincidences? I don't know, man. I do not, for the most part, I guess.
I don't believe in coincidence. I believe in synchronicities.
Yes. So why is this thing jet black with the elongated fangs? And why does that, in my head, when I sit down and piece together what the rest of the body potentially could look like, why does it fit into almost identical to the Michigan Dogman and some of these reports? It's mind blowing.
The more delve into this, and you've sent me a lot of good research. I appreciate that. This rabbit hole goes deep, my friend.
I appreciate you for saying that. And
Yes, I do try to spend all the time I have available on research on this topic, because there's a lot that goes into it. And I mean, I have, like we spoke about on your show, a ton of other things that do occur in my brain that I've just collected, but I don't actively, research that. Meaning when I'm going to bed and I'm watching Extinct Zoo and I'm learning all kinds of stuff, I'm still learning, but I'm not purposely trying to go out of my way to learn about ancient elephants. But when I hear those things, my brain's a sponge, sucks right up in there. And then at some other point in time, when I'm on your podcast or somebody else's and they speak about something, it's just like bing, 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 bing. Starfox, you got a file up in your brain you might want to clean out about these ancient elephants.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I've got all these vertical files in my head that's got all kinds of information that I've accumulated through the years. And I started doing this when I was a kid. I started looking into things. At one time, I wanted to have a dual major in archaeology and anthropology. Didn't work out that way. Ended up getting accepted to law school, and then decided that wasn't a career for me, so I ended up with degrees in English and art, and here you are. Either one of those and $5 will get you a cup of coffee.
You're the man. And I do, obviously, the audience should know who you are. You don't need an introduction from anybody, but you're on here. You got to give yourself a plug to the audience. Everyone, the links are going to be up in there. And as I said, you really should know who Steve is. But Steve, before we move on, would you like to give yourself a little bit of a plug, brother?
Yeah, be sure and check out my Missing Person Mysteries channel on YouTube. It's also have the audio version on Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, all those places. I think you'll dig it. Got about 5 YouTube channels total, under just under 500,000 subscribers all the way across the board. And then on the audio only side, get about 3.5 million listens a month. And then I write books too. Got 5 that did really well. Strange Things in the Woods, My Strange World, which is autobiographical, just some of my personal experiences, mainly in childhood. And then National Park Mysteries and Disappearances, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And more volumes of that coming. I've got some other stuff I've written. Looking forward to publishing my 21st book in 2025.
Boom. That is some classically great stuff right there.
And I left out a couple of things. So I have a radio show. I'm on everything out there. It's on Sunday nights from 9 to 11 Eastern Time on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network.
And to the audience, yes, all those plugs will be up in the description, so you will be able to get
that. I forget how much stuff I have got sometimes, but I got a lot of irons in the fire there.
Hey man, that's some great stuff, brother, and you got to stay busy and keep on rolling for sure. And I had sent you some other stuff I do want to potentially dive into, but I have something that I would like to share with you, and I think you're just going to find this interesting in general. And it's a little bit off the Dogman topic, but it's not, because it's still animal behavior and just shows the lack of what we really know. And recently they found a Greenland shark. Everyone can look that up. Pretty gnarly, prehistoric looking shark. Well, it was 400 years old. And they now, after studying it more and being introduced to other old species, they don't mature till 150. Recently, the most old animals that we had a chance to really document were reptiles, meaning like crocodiles were 130 or so, give or take. I mean, there were orcas that were around 90 years old, but 400 years old.
That's pretty good.
Right? Yeah, we knew trees and things could live to that, but just think now, something is around for 400 years. I mean, I'm not saying anything Dogman based could live for that long, but I'm just saying, would anyone have believed any of us if we said a shark lived for 400 years? Probably not. Right?
We wouldn't have believed it. Yeah, and at the lower end of the estimate, 272-year lifespan. So not quite 400, but even 272 years, that's a long time. And some of the theories that they use to explain that long lifespan is it has a very, very slow metabolism, and it's been able to adapt easily to the deep, cold waters that it inhabits. So there you go. Makes me wonder what's down in the Mariana Trench. Imagine how much pressure there is down there at the bottom of that. What would something be like if it came out of there and came up on land? It'd be superhuman. It'd tear all of us up. Think about stuff like this at night when I can't sleep. What if something decided to come up, some sort of H.P. Lovecraft type beast or something, like Kraken or something, come up out from, miles underwater and start just ripping all over everybody. That'd be a good horror film.
Yes, it would be a straight up good horror film. And honestly, as a scientific mind, I would say one of two options. Like you said, either something comes up that handles the pressure, or unfortunately, there are some deep water fish that when they pulled them up, they actually looked more disgusting than they actually were because their bodies blew up and they spit their guts out because of the pressure, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be one of those two options.
Yeah, it could go either way. Yeah, somewhere I saw a report about a fish they had pulled out of somewhere really deep that had an almost human face on it. That thing was freaking out. It may not have been actual. It may have been special effects or AI or something, but anything that has a human face other than a human is going to be strange.
Is that not the truth? And what did you think about some of the other stuff I sent to you? And what are your thoughts, or what do you think's occurring with that?
Well, I'm particularly interested in those walking bears. A lot of bear stuff on missing persons and mysteries. We delve into national park stuff. I've covered bear attacks and things like that. But there's some strange bears out there, and they do some strange things. And one of the spookiest things I've ever seen was the pictures of a bear that had the mange. Now I can see why somebody misidentified that as a cryptid or something, but anything that has the mange. I saw an elk with a mange up in Washington State, and that was frightening looking. But what do you think about that? Because bears can walk on two legs. Most of the time they don't, but apparently there are certain anomalous bears, maybe just their own individual preference, that do walk around quite a bit on two legs. So that's, you don't think of them as a bipedal animal, even though they can mix it up like that. But the one you sent me there from New Jersey, he just like strolling around, and then there's another one. I don't remember where the other one was from. It was a YouTube video, but a bear just walking around like a man.
There it is, right? And that is what I mean about, just science. So when people are like, oh, that doesn't occur, well, there's two quality videos right there that it does occur. And from a distance, that black bear looks like some of the descriptions of a dogman. And also, like you said, now add mange on a bear that's doing that. And
Yeah,
okay, wait, it's just that black bear? No, dude, look at that massive grizzly bear. He was just chilling too, walking like that.
yeah.
And I definitely think that some of the misidentifications have to be that, dude, because people right there, bears walk on two legs. I don't know about you, man. Those things seem pretty chill up on their legs. I mean, obviously, if on all fours, they could potentially be faster, but they have no problem doing that. I mean,
And I think that it could be a learned behavior, or it could be something that, how do you know it wasn't a performing bear that somebody's taught to do that and then released it in the wild or passed it on to other bears or something? Because, back in the day when I was a kid, you'd see bears riding bicycles and stuff on these TV shows, like Ted Mack's Original Amateur Hour and Ed Sullivan and some of those. So you can teach them to do, basic things like that. But who's to say that, like I said, somebody didn't train one, turn it loose, and it's just out walking around chilling. Or maybe other bears observed it doing it and they picked it up. Animals learn from one another. And, the old saying, monkey see, monkey do, there's some truth in that. We talked about the 100th monkey syndrome on my show, where all of a sudden there were monkeys in this one area that somehow figured out to wash their sweet potatoes. And after a time, monkeys on other islands, and these didn't have any way to communicate, they were isolated. All the monkeys in that general area started doing it. And that's a theory about the 100th monkey, that there's a point there where it becomes like a hive mind or a mentality where they somehow communicated with each other telepathically or through some other means other than vocalizations or showing. So I believe in things like that. I believe that can happen with a lot of different things.
that's some great stuff right there. And to add some, extra clarity to that, I mean, they have seen that in orcas, meaning I don't know my terminologies for boating. I am not a sea captain, but I do know one was named port side and whatever the other side of a boat would be.
Starboard would be the other side.
Okay, so that's what they were named, and they had bent over fins, which, as far as anyone has ever known, that means you either have to have been in captivity or something traumatic has happened to you. But these things are out in South Africa, and they were the first two orcas ever in the whole entire world to start feeding on just the liver of seven gill sharks as well as great white sharks. They eventually left South Africa and then popped up in another area where these orcas did not do that. But then this group of orcas that weren't necessarily chilling with these two brothers started doing the same behavior. Now, when you look at great white sharks as well, not all great white sharks leap out of the water. That's only been documented in Cape Cod, California, and also South Africa, where they project themselves out of the water. Well, also recently in California, they have seen very large white sharks swimming into areas that they've never seen them come in this close to shore, because they're catching seals and sea lions completely off guard, where they're just laying, chilling in this really shallow water. But right there is, again, that's showing how behaviorisms are being taught. So obviously those two orcas were the first ones to be doing this. Orcas are smart, picked up on it, started the same tactic. And same thing, obviously other sharks saw one great white go in and be ballsy and then proceeded to realize, hey, wait a second, it's a payoff.
Yeah. And that's it. Food is the mitigating factor there. That's kind of like the guy that rang the bell to feed the dogs, Pavlovian response. Where he would ring the bell when he fed the dogs, and it got to the point to where he could just ring the bell and the dogs would salivate because they knew it was time to eat. So the animals can learn. There is learned behavior and things like that you can train them to do. That's not necessarily part of their nature.
Boom, right there, 100%. And another really interesting thing with the whole hyenas, because I know that this is definitely coming into play a lot, is there in Africa are two different variations. One is more of a werewolf, but it's a were hyena, and the other one has nothing to do with shape-shifting whatsoever. It falls into the line of a cynocephali, like the ancient Greek and other aspects that have been spoken about, meaning it wears large cloaks and baggy clothing and acts like they're a trader at the outskirts of town, or they need help or something, and then you come close and they end up snagging you. Interesting.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, right, frightening. But if you look back in the past now, like you were saying with these hyenas, all the very large hyenas that they are very optimistic preyed on human beings. Well, they all have names that fall into the name of the species they were consuming. Okay, there has a tie-in, and it's all like ancient Latin words and stuff. So I mean, it's interesting, but we've spoken about it before, how scientists just come up with these gnarly names, and I still can't say half of the species of the hyenas that they found. Okay, I mean, I can only still blatantly say 4 or 5 quality scientific words that I had to work my butt cheeks off, but these ones preyed on people. Still to this day, spotted hyenas prey on people. They dig up grave sites. They consume that. Bears used to do that. Wolves used to do that. And one of our ancestors, almost comically, had a lifespan of 12 years old because this shorter version of us was in packs and groups up to like 85. But they decided their genius was going to be scavenging. Okay, well, let's keep in mind you're in Africa, and I don't know, man, when you're pretty mini and you're going up against giant lions and bears and such, and hyenas and cats, if that's the brightest idea. But they were only supposedly able to fend off jackals, foxes, and like maybe some cheetahs in the area.
Yeah.
But they were consumed by the hyenas and things that would come to this area to steal back from them. Well, one of these ancestors of ours had a mark on the back of his skull where some sort of large cat had this hominoid in its mouth at one point in time, but it somehow had survived. But before this wound was fully healed on this poor SOB's head, he then was consumed by a giant crocodile where apparently, obviously, he decided he needed water or something, or made a bad decision. So when you look back in history, it ties into all these things do feed on us. And I think that humans have a misconception that we're safe, but it's like our science team says, when you're in nature, you're on the menu, and you have these hyenas that are prevalent in everything here. All these cultures speak about them, right? And they have hyena heads, wolf heads, dog heads, whatever. But what the heck? Saudi Arabia, the other area you spoke of. These are areas that they're not acknowledged to exist, which means they either have been undocumented or they're just traveling to these areas. And what do you think about all that?
Yeah, there's other places too, in China, South Africa, and there's different, hyenas that are extinct. There was what was it, the short-nosed or the short-faced one, and it was kind of a giant hyena, and I can't pronounce these names. And I had Latin in school. And there were cave hyenas. There's they have different social structures and hunting behaviors. And there are some places where they've found, just a horde, like you sent me there, hordes of bones that where the hyenas were stashing them. But I wonder if there didn't come a time when man kind of flipped the switch and started hunting the hyenas. It was then us or them. We got to eat them before they eat us, that type of thing.
Isn't that
A very interesting question.
Because
And
the hyenas are scavengers, but so were the early humans, the hunter gatherers.
Yep. And I think with anything that was really out in the open, that's a very great way to deal with it. Yet, not saying our ancestors wouldn't do this, but myself, I don't know, man, unless someone really forced me to, I'm not going to be
Yeah,
the one to go in and do this. But because short faced cave bears, cave hyenas, 80% of the time they're in the caves, even up to more 90% of the time frames. And they would come out and gather stuff and just disappear back up in there. And like with the Smithsonian, they found that by mistake. They weren't even looking for that lava tube. They just broke through it by mistake while they were researching another area, and then they found all those bones in there. So that would have went completely undiscovered without, a mistake. I don't know. I could see, like I said, if we were dealing with something that is on the prairie that keeps coming into our tribe area, sure, we're going to chase it off. But when it comes to those big caves like that, man, if they're living in these huge caves where we don't really fully know where they are, how are we really going to go in there and find them, I guess? And how many
yeah,
of us would it take to, with our spear? Now, if we have full-fledged weapons, and sure, but I'm talking about like our ancestors that we're
yeah.
talking about, how would we find them in there? And with our spears and things?
Cave systems like here in the U.S. on the east side, anyway. Place like Mammoth Cave that goes for miles and miles and miles
Mhm.
and miles underground. They could go in the cave here, come out, in the next state, eat somebody, go back in the cave, and then go cache their kill somewhere.
Yes. So I do think, we probably did have some clashes where, we did unalive some of them and, scavenge some of their remains. But the reason I say that too is with the Dinopithecus, that giant baboon, they're pretty optimistic that our ancestors tried to avoid them at all costs. But obviously there are some times where they had some of their bones around, but the scientists seem to think that this thing probably just passed away and we collected and scavenged from it, you know what I mean? But I think that we maybe would have forced them back into the cave areas, but I don't know. I almost seem like we would have maybe relocated a little bit, just kind of like with some of the indigenous cultures where they just got up and left areas. But
Yeah.
again, I don't know, but it would seem like the most logical because if someone was like, hey, Steve, you, Star Fox, and a couple other, you got your spears and your little flame torches that you have to set on fire, like you said, that like last like what 10-15 minutes, and these
Yeah.
caves are going for like miles and miles, and I'm not going in there
And
looking
then
for
if
that
you're
thing.
in there in the dark with no light source, they can see in the dark, so you're done for. And
Yes.
I'd like to think it's not a happy thought, but maybe some of those people thought, hey, let's go in the cave for shelter, instead of building these huts out of sticks and stuff. We can go in the cave, and then they got surprised. There's already something living in the cave that wanted them for dinner. Not a pleasant thought.
That is so true, my friend. And yeah, there is definitely proven aspects of where humans have, dwelled in caves for a while. But from what I understand, humans, we really don't like to be in that environment for too long. I mean, if it's like an area you go back and sleep at night, but then we get out and travel around during the day, it's not like we just consistently wanted to live in the caves and such. So it's something that is intriguing because again, we know nothing about it, and we know, we ourselves have gone in there at points in time to, use it as shelters and such. So if we are, and we know something like the short-faced cave bear and the cave hyenas use that as a dwelling system and an actual area to reproduce and live, well, yeah, of course. I mean, I think that's something people do need to look at, but I don't know even how people are going to be able to necessarily be successful at that because May Koo, our spelunker and also a paleontologist expert, I believe she said only 10% of cave systems lead back to the surface.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the odds of even finding anybody in there are slim to none. I mean, she said she's found some interesting things that you could tell were washed in from like flash floods, you know what I mean? Like old ancient arrowheads, and unfortunately some people that were caught in flash floods. But she said those are usually in areas that, people like spelunkers are actually going through. She said she's seen some areas and been in areas that haven't been touched in like thousands or millions of years. And basically, you and I could just touch this ancient bear claw mark and ruin it because that's how still the environment is almost identical to when that giant bear, put its claws into the clay or whatever on the wall. So it's fascinating.
Yeah. And I've been to some places, like Lost Sea and Sweetwater, Tennessee is like that. There's a fossilized, I think it's say a lynx or some kind of big cat that's been in there for eons. And it happens, there's these the cave dwellers and people were there at one time, but I don't know, that was more in the Southwest. I think you had the cliff dwellers, and then in East Tennessee had what they called when I was growing up Indian bluffs. It wasn't exactly a cave. It was just kind of a hollowed out place back in the hill, and they lived under there and had their cooking fires and stuff. But they were out in the woods. They didn't spend a lot of time
Hmm.
in any one place. They were like the equivalent of long hunters. They had to go after the game, and they moved. There's a migratory pattern there depending on the season.
Yes, exactly. So that is, I guess, more or less, you just put it into great prime words of what I was trying to say is that humans, we will use caves, but even on the ancient Neanderthal sites and stuff, it's not like these caves went in miles and miles. I mean, we're talking about maybe the size of what your apartment or something. I mean, enough where these people could move around, but like you
Yeah,
said, it's
just
not
enough to get in and out of the elements and build a fire, maybe.
exactly.
But other than
And then
that,
go
no, I
back out and travel.
don't think they were too anxious to explore what was back in there. Might be some of those giant spiders like we talked about on my show.
Yes, and that's why I do think the answers that, people are going to be looking for, I'm not saying they're all in the caves, but it lines up with behaviors of animals that did exist and still do exist because that's something I really also try to specialize in is predator behavior, whether it's modern day or prehistoric, just to look at how these things did act and how their relatives did. And man, I've been nerding out like crazy. And these really smart scientists, I wish they had something to do with myself and the North American Dogman Project because they would be a great asset to our additional science team. But they aren't. Either way, though, they did some really great things explaining why dire wolves, giant lions, and also large short-faced cave bears really have no reason that they couldn't still be kicking around right now. I mean, the environment is still the same. The food sources are easier for them to now be able to have connection with. And again, short-faced cave bear, cave hyenas, 90, 80% of the time in the caves. Well, what are the odds of people seeing that? If they love being and chilling in caves, they're going to come out, grab something, then drag it back to their home, correct? So, I mean,
Exactly. That's
yeah.
exactly right. And a lot of big cats are that way. They'll cache their kids. They're up in a tree or in bushes or things like that. So I've come across that in some of these missing person cases where that's just the stock explanation was, oh, a bear or a big cat got them. But I don't always buy that because any kind of apex predator like that, they're not going to eat your boots. They're not going to eat your belt buckle. They're not going to eat your clothing and stuff. Maybe, they find clothing scraps and things sometimes in bear's cat. But that's just too much of a pat answer for me as, oh, it was a big cat or it was a bear. There's other things out there. And who knows, the dog man.
Right. And as it just keeps on growing with interest. I mean, here's another prime example too of this is just a known animal. Okay. I mean, again, we don't even fully know the behaviorisms of wolves to the extent that we would like, but wolves travel around 333 to 350 miles is their chill area, and then they will consume a victim within 30 to 35 miles of their den. Okay, that means the rest of the area, they're just trying to scope it out. Do we want to move the den? Like, is anyone encroaching on our land? But if it's in the 35-mile away, all right, we'll feed. This is safe enough for us. That's a really large area. Okay, so that's why I try to tell people when they see a wolf track or something down in Tennessee or Kentucky, and they are like, there's no way, there's no wolves down here. There's only red wolves. It's like, dude, there's wolves up in Michigan that are gray wolves and timber wolves. And like I just stated, they have a massive area that they venture out into. Logically, yes, of course it would stop down into Tennessee or Kentucky to come through and
Yeah,
check out
just
that
passing
area.
through.
Yeah, it's like that mountain lion that they tracked all the way from the Midwest that I believe it got hit in upstate New York on the highway, unfortunately, but they could see it literally on trail cams and going through people's yards. And when they checked its
Yeah.
DNA and stuff, yeah, it belonged way back in the mid.
That's part of being a cryptid, just or cryptozoology, animals that show up in a place where they're not supposed to, but it happens all the time. Like the big cats in the UK, and there's pictures from the 1950s of a kangaroo happily bounding through a cornfield in Tennessee. Sometimes things they get there with no explanation.
Right. And that is so beautifully stated, like you said, because I just think sometimes people assume that animals aren't going to reclaim their area. And it's like our tracker was saying. I mean, that's part of a species surviving. Arizona, 8 jaguars just seen. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. My science team's like, no, not really. I mean, they were there before. It's only logically time that they actually start coming back to the area. Surprisingly, it's almost an anomaly that they hadn't yet, you know?
Yeah, and I think we'll see more and more of that as man continues to encroach on their natural habitats and things. There's going to be a tipping point there, and you're seeing that in some areas, like in the Great Smokies. You're seeing more bears venturing into downtown Gatlinburg and into build-up areas and things like that, until they learn to not come around there because of the bad things that'll happen to them. Animals are just they're going to be naturally curious. They're going to come where there's food sources, like garbage and things like that. People leaving food where they can get to it. That just encourages that kind of behavior, even unknowingly.
Isn't that the truth, my friend? And as we are starting to wrap this up, where do you stand on what do you think is occurring with the missing people and the cave systems? And what do you think is the quote unquote dogman? Do you feel like there are differences like I do with like the werewolf and dogman stuff? Or do you think it's kind of like one and the same? Where do you fit in with this?
I think there's a difference, and just like with the Bigfoot, they're all different. I mean, you've got, say, a fox, you've got a red fox, you've got a gray fox, a squirrel. You've got different versions of squirrels. Maybe in this area they're darker, in this area they're lighter. I think it's the same with Bigfoot or Dogman or anything like that, depending on where they are. And that's, the Native American versions. You've got Sabe, you've got Sasquatch, you've got Bigfoot, you've got the Yeti, other places. I think they're different, just like people are in certain geographical areas. Like I'm up here in New England now. People are a lot different than they were when I was down south or when I was out west, but they're still people nonetheless. I think it's the same with animals. And yeah, I believe that Bigfoot and both dogmen, their beginnings are in some type of creature that we haven't necessarily identified yet, but I think there's more to it. There's a almost a supernatural element, some kind of maybe supernatural is a bad word, but outside of our normal or natural, just something that hadn't been discovered yet.
That's great stuff. And I actually was introduced to someone that was saying that I guess a lot of people, misuse the term paranormal, supernatural. It doesn't have to fully be something I guess we think is the normal term for that. It could just mean something outside of the box. So no,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
good terminology right there. And here's one final note for you too. And I will send you the sketches on it. The animal itself is no longer where it was claimed to have been. So there are one or two reasons for that. One, that the woman who made the initial post on this trail app where runners go and stuff, either that is not where the actual location was, or it's been removed by predators or park rangers. But on the initial image, you can see it's something of canine-ish looking. But like I said, hyenas, look like canines, but aren't. And this thing's head's kind of smushed. But the interesting thing now is its back parts of its teeth after like the initial front of the canines look massively almost like pig tusks. And when you look at the inside of a hyena's mouth, well, those back teeth are huge and almost look like a pig tusk. They're different than canine teeth. We unfortunately tried to send our science team out there because two of our scientists were actually near that initial area. They were unable to get a hold of the woman, and they couldn't find the specimen. But if it was taken in Idaho, like she claims it was, we're pretty optimistic that that had some sort of hyena lineage in it because of its teeth set up. And so whether it was a fox or not, which somebody potentially thinks it was, somewhere down the evolutionary line, hyenas were mixed in with foxes a little bit as well. So interesting stuff, man.
Yeah. And it just goes to show you there are things that aren't supposed to happen, yet they do happen. We talked about that. My dad was a scientist out at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and they would have things that happen under extreme controlled laboratory conditions that they couldn't explain why it happened. They couldn't get it to do it again. There used to be a magazine that I subscribed to back, I guess it was in the 80s or something, now 90s, called a Journal of Irreproducible Results. And it happens sometimes. And that was my dad's explanation. He said, sometimes there's just things that happen that are beyond our laws and our theories and just doesn't make any sense because it doesn't fit in anywhere. And that's what he said. You've got to think outside the box sometimes because everything doesn't always fit where it's supposed to fit when you try to pigeonhole it.
Isn't that beautifully stated? And I couldn't agree more, which is why I do always try to start with science. And I have the people that can then try to figure it out outside of that, meaning like science to me, I look down, I see my foot. Oh, it's bruised right now because I stubbed my toe. I touch it. Ow, that hurts. You know what I mean? So that's how I know my foot exists and stuff, right? And same thing with, an animal outside. I see its tracks and things. So I try to always start with stuff like that. But then you do have things that just really fall out of the realm of what it could be. I mean, a lot of times I do believe, yes, bears, like we were talked about, the walking bears and the prehistoric animals and all these things. But then you have other ones where it just doesn't fall into that. Like you said, no matter how hard you look at everything, it just doesn't. So then you got to step back and be like, all right, where's this fit in? And then you start looking at some of the lore and history and mythology, and it fits in, but then technically by science terms, that's not quality evidence. So it's really interesting, man.
Yeah, just it's fascinating, and it seems like the more we discover, the more we find out we actually don't know. The more we learn, the less we know. Isn't that true?
Isn't that the facts, my friend? So thank you to everyone that did take some time out tonight to hang out with us and nerd out, because Steve always has some great information. And as earlier stated, he is going to be a bi-weekly host. So make sure to pop in for that. But also check out all the great things that Steve is doing, because he does way more than just, prehistoric and modern day predators and dogman behaviors, which is what I cover. Steve covers a lot of amazing things. So yes, please do go over there, subscribe, check him out. I mean, he's one of my good friends. So just the fact that he comes on to Midnight Lycanthropy means he's supporting what I do. So it's only fair that we support him back. So thanks a lot, man.
I appreciate that. Sorry, Fox.
If you did make it this far tonight, you truly are a legend, and I do appreciate all the support. If you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, and share it. Feed the algorithm, and I will catch you on the next one.